Here are the pros and cons of living in Roswell, Georgia. The first pro of living in Roswell, Georgia is the downtown part of the city of Roswell. It's right where Highway 9 and Atlanta Street and Magnolia Street meet, and right around that intersection of those roads is where the downtown section of Roswell is. There's a bunch of cool shops there, a bunch of restaurants there as well. It's really one of the highlights of living in Roswell. One thing that makes Roswell so unique, and especially the downtown part of Roswell, is that it has kept a lot of the historic charm of the city. And so a lot of that character and a lot of the old buildings are still preserved there in the city of Roswell. And it really makes Roswell a unique part of Metro Atlanta. Not all of the suburbs have kept that kind of historic feel to the city, but Roswell certainly has done a great job of that. Roswell Provisions, 1920 Tavern, and Lola's Burger and Tequila Bar are some of my favorites there in the downtown Roswell area. Also in downtown Roswell is like a little park area with some benches for sitting, hanging out, maybe walking the dog. And it's very common to find people walking up and down the sidewalks there in downtown Roswell. Overall, it's a great place to hang out, spend time. If you're ever in Roswell, Georgia, you certainly want to check out downtown Roswell. Another benefit of living in Roswell is the amount of nature and green space and parks that there are in Roswell, Georgia. In fact, just a couple minutes from downtown Roswell is Vickery Creek Falls, which is a waterfall and trail and park area that is really surprising to find so close to the city center of Roswell. There's a bunch of hiking trails there around Vickery Creek Falls, and so lots of people hiking around there. It's a great place to spend time. There's also an old mill in Vickery Creek Falls, and that mill is kind of one of the trademarks of the city of Roswell. Also on the south side of Roswell is Azalea Drive, which goes right along the Chattahoochee River. On Azalea Drive, you can find lots of places for walking and jogging. There's also a lot of parks off of Azalea Drive next to the river. And then, of course, lots of people hanging out on the river, swimming, fishing, boating there on the Chattahoochee River. So overall, there's really a lot of great options for finding outdoor activities in the city of Roswell. And then another big benefit of living in the city of Roswell is its proximity to one of the most popular suburbs in all of Metro Atlanta, Alpharetta. Of course, if you're thinking about moving to Roswell or Alpharetta or any of the suburbs around Metro Atlanta, feel free to call or text me, email me anytime. Thank you so much to everyone who has reached out. I'm always happy to help. But being so close to the city of Alpharetta makes Roswell a really unique experience. Very often people who want to be close to the amenities and close to the things that Alpharetta provides but not pay the Alpharetta prices will choose to live in Roswell, and that's a great strategy. You can get more home for your money in Roswell, but still be super close to things like the Avalon or downtown Alpharetta. There really are so many great features about Alpharetta, but you can have that while living in Roswell. Another benefit or pro of living in Roswell, Georgia, is its location in relation to the rest of Metro Atlanta. It's just north of Atlanta, and compared to some of the other suburbs, it's very close to the city of Atlanta. For people who are living in Roswell and working in Atlanta, the commute is much easier than some of the other suburbs, especially because Roswell is very close to Highway 400 and also Highway 9. Highway 400 and Highway 9 run parallel north and south from the city of Atlanta up to as far north as Forsyth County. And being able to access Highway 400 and Highway 9 really makes getting around the city of Atlanta very easy for the people who live in Roswell. In addition to that, having two major roads from Roswell to Atlanta helps a little bit with the amount of traffic that there is in that part of town. Very often, if the rush hour traffic is heavier, like on 400, people will use Highway 9 instead. Or if the rush hour traffic is heavier on Highway 9, people will use 400 instead. So it just kind of depends on the day. Using the GPS is obviously super helpful to determine which one of those two roads is less congested that day, but having two roads into the city of Atlanta is super helpful for the residents of Roswell. And then another benefit or pro of living in Roswell, Georgia, is that it's a very good mix of the commercial areas and also the residential areas. Roswell is a very typical suburban city that has that suburban feel. You're going to find a lot of neighborhoods there in Roswell. And then you're also going to find some sporadic shopping here and there. There are some parts of the city that have more shopping than others. And so a lot of the commercial parts of Roswell are going to be found on Highway 9 and also Holcomb Bridge Road, especially at the intersection of Highway 9 and Holcomb Bridge Road. That's really one of the main commercial areas. There's lots of restaurants and shops around there. And then off of those roads is where you'll find the residential areas, the neighborhoods with the HOAs who very often have pools and clubhouse and tennis courts. So the suburban living in Roswell, Georgia is very typical of many of the other suburbs around Atlanta, but they also have a lot of shopping and restaurants there in the city, which is really one of the big draws for many people who live in the city of Roswell. And another pro for living in Roswell, Georgia is the amount of jobs that there are there in Roswell. There are lots of tech companies and a lot of medical companies very close to Roswell and in the city of Roswell. North Fulton Hospital is off of Highway 9 in Roswell and certainly provides lots of jobs for many of the people in and around Roswell. Also, there are a lot of doctor offices around North Fulton Hospital as well. And as far as tech companies go, NCR has headquarters in Duluth, IBM has headquarters in Alpharetta, and Honeywell also has headquarters in Alpharetta. So all around that area in the North Fulton part of Metro Atlanta, there are lots of jobs, lots of medical and tech jobs, and there's another really big draw for many people who live in that area. Okay, so enough of like the good parts of living in Roswell. Let's talk about really what you want to know about. Let's talk about the downsides of living in Roswell, Georgia. Certainly, one of the things you need to be aware of if you're thinking about living in Roswell is the school ratings in Roswell. While there are some good schools, public schools in the city of Roswell, some of the public schools in Roswell are not very good. So it kind of depends on what part of the city you're wanting to live in, but keep in mind that not all of the schools have excellent ratings. For example, Sweet Apple Elementary School is a 10 out of 10, but Vickery Mill Elementary School is a 5 out of 10. And then Roswell High School is an 8 out of 10, but Centennial High School is a 6 out of 10. So if school ratings is something that's high on your priority list for finding a new home, you certainly want to be mindful of what part of the city of Roswell you're living in and check out the school districts. Again, lots of these school ratings that you find on Zillow and Realtor.com, they come from a website called greatschools.org. And this is a great website for being able to find not only the school ratings, whether it's a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, but greatschools.org breaks that down and really talks a lot about the schools and a lot of different categories about the schools that can be helpful for determining which schools are most interesting to you. And then another downside about living in Roswell, Georgia is that there are not really a lot of new homes in Roswell. Roswell is kind of close to Atlanta, and so because of that, the expansion of Atlanta has far past Roswell. So a lot of those homes in Roswell were built decades ago, 70s, 80s, 90s. Of course, there is some new construction in Roswell. It's just not very common. It's not as common as Forsyth County or in Cherokee County, Georgia. In Roswell, which is in Fulton County, Georgia, it's not very common to find new homes. And by new homes, I mean homes built in the last 10 to 20 years. This is not a really common thing in Roswell. And then another con about living in Roswell is that the traffic can get kind of bad, like many of the suburbs of Atlanta. But Roswell especially, again, because of its proximity to Atlanta, the traffic there can get pretty bad. And so there are a lot of major thoroughfares in and out of Roswell and to the city of Atlanta, and that does help out a little bit. But Highway 9 in rush hour on the way to Atlanta, you do not want to get caught on Highway 9 during rush hour in Roswell, Georgia. It absolutely sucks and can really make that commute to Atlanta a lot longer. Another downside about living in Roswell is that the downtown area of Roswell is not very big. It's kind of a small area in comparison to downtown areas like Marietta Square or downtown Swanee. Roswell's downtown area does not really include a whole bunch of restaurants. There's not a lot of shops there. It's kind of minimal. So it's really maybe like one block of the downtown Roswell area. So if you live in Roswell and you like hanging out in the downtown area, you're going to see a lot of the same restaurants over and over. And then in addition to that, some people don't like the aged look of downtown Roswell. Some people prefer the newer look of like Alpharetta or Swanee. Again, Roswell has that historic feel, and if that's not really the kind of vibe that you're looking for, it's just something to think about. Roswell certainly has a much older historic feel to it. And then while we're talking about the downtown area, another downside of Roswell is that there's not really much of a nightlife in Roswell. Again, there is that downtown area. You can kind of find some nightlife around there, but it's nothing like the city of Atlanta. It's nothing like Midtown or Buckhead. Because Roswell is a suburb with families, it's certainly not known for its nightlife and its entertainment. You're not going to find a whole bunch of things to do in the city of Roswell. And then another downside about living in Roswell is the humidity that you find in Roswell and really many of the other suburbs around Atlanta. Metro Atlanta is known for having some of the worst humidity, like in the summertime. You're talking about 95% humidity. So while it may be 90 to 95 degrees in the summertime in Roswell, when you add that to the amount of humidity that we have here, it just really makes it unbearable for a lot of people. And so this is kind of 1 or 2 months out of the year, you're going to find that really harsh, humid, hot summer. The rest of the year is not so bad, but that like July and August time in Metro Atlanta can get pretty rough. And then in addition to that, while we're talking about the weather, you should also know that the highs, I would say, in the summertime in Roswell is around 95 degrees at its worst, maybe 100 degrees. Maybe the coldest part in the winter in Metro Atlanta and in Roswell is going to be about 10 degrees. But that's not very common. Again, that may be 1 or 2 weeks out of the year. Also, because of the amount of pine trees that we have in Roswell, it's very common to have a lot of allergens. People with seasonal allergies don't really like the amount of pine trees. Pine trees put off pollen, and pollen can cause a lot of allergies with people who have seasonal allergies. So certainly something to think about if you're going to move to Roswell, Georgia. Being prepared for like the weather and the allergies in Roswell, Georgia is just one part of moving to a new place. If you're thinking about moving to any part of Metro Atlanta and you're not really sure where to start, I've got a great video for you. This video is exactly about that. We're talking about the very first steps to take when you're moving to Metro Atlanta. I'll see you there.